LoJoWo podcast. Really not in love with that name yet. It might grow on me if I come up with some better ideas, or if I have some friends, or if I'm really lucky, people who listen to me that I don't know give me suggestions on any cool podcast names that I like better than this. But yeah, like I said, the name might grow on me a little bit. I'm actually really liking the graphic of it, as like janky as it looks. It looks kind of sassy, not gonna lie. It should be up on the screen right now, what you're watching. Literally just type that in on a free meme making template thing that I found online. That's how I made this whole graphic that's there. And also, I didn't know how to download it from the website I made it on, so it's literally just a screenshot of what I made. That's what I'm doing. And how I'm making these videos, or these two videos so far I've made, they're just a picture slideshow. I just made a slideshow on the video editor that's just on the computer already. Slideshow, one picture, just put a custom audio over it using the Audacity audio file of me just, doing my thing. Definitely see a future as a professional video editor. That skill's coming up on the rise, as you can see. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed filming that first episode. After I made it, I really just wanted to do it again. Like, I didn't want to really do anything else. I was thinking about that a lot, just, within the next couple days. So here I am 2 days later, recording another one. I don't know if I'll post this one today. I might be doing some editing, just because that actually takes a little bit longer than the recording part. But maybe since I've already done it once, and that was my first time, I had figuring everything out, this time it might go way faster, so who knows. I think I'm going to change the background of the graphic that you're seeing on the screen. I think it's going to be a little bit better of a spacey theme. This is just such a random thing that I threw together, but I actually kind of like it. It's just, I don't know, it has a little bit of personality to it, but I don't know. I just kind of like what I've done with it. But I actually got more views than I was expecting to on that first video, which was, I think it's at 33 views right now, which I know it sounds pretty sad, but man, it was my first video, and I really wasn't expecting it to have really any views. I thought maybe like 12 at best or something like that. I didn't even share it with that many people. I just sent it to a few of my friends, but hopefully people are liking it. Hopefully my audio or the, lousy production of everything isn't turning people off, but that stuff will get better with time. Today I kind of wanted to talk about the bubble. Didn't really talk about the bubble too much before. I kind of just talked about the Nuggets and a little bit of the teams that they would be playing, and then I kind of went into the past with stuff like the Thunder transactions and stuff like that. But so today I think I'm going to talk just mainly about contenders, like playoff matchups, my picks for who's going to win it all, maybe some dark horse teams, maybe some playoff matchups that I would find interesting. Also might touch on like the Western Conference playoff race, all those things. First off, obviously the three main contenders in this Disney bubble. Everybody's looking at the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Bucks. I think the Vegas odds for those three teams are all super high. I think Bucks are first. Pretty sure Lakers are second and Clippers are third. I think I might have the Lakers and Clippers flipped around, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was, just for Vegas odds. But then after those three teams, those odds, yeah, they fall off a cliff. I think the Boston Celtics are the fourth highest in the odds. Toronto's definitely right there with Celtics, pretty close. Then it goes down to, I think, like Rockets and Nuggets, other teams. But obviously Bucks, Clippers, and Lakers are the three big ones that everybody's looking at. Rightly so. I mean, the Bucks have had a phenomenal season. They were on track to, at one point they were on track to win, I think, over 70 games. But obviously the tail end of the season, Giannis missed quite a few games in a row. They did get some losses in there. So, if the season would have continued, they for sure would have been mid-60s, high 60s, probably by the end of the season, which is, a great team. That's a great regular season. A lot of years don't have teams with that good of a record in the regular season. So the Bucks system that they've built over the last couple of years, just around Giannis and having, Mike Budenholzer running everything, Coach Bud, it's a pretty good strategy, really good idea for building up a team around that, a successful team. Their main philosophy, their main strategy is just having Giannis as, the threat to attack the rim that he is all the time. He had more points in the paint just last season than anybody since Shaq. So that's pretty ridiculous. And I think it was something like 70% of his points came off dunks. Or so. That seems high, but it was something ridiculous like that. It's like the highest percentage of anybody since Shaq. So he's definitely the most paint-dominant player in the league right now, even though he's not a center or anything traditionally like a back-to-the-basket or even face-up, in the paint type of game. He's really just a slashing, long guard forward hybrid. Very interesting player, doing some damage this season. His per 36 stats are just what's nuts to me. I think he's right at 36 points per 36 minutes, almost a point a minute, which is just mind-boggling. I think it's like 15 rebounds per game per 36, and then like seven and a half assists. Pretty crazy. High 50s for shooting percentage. He's been having a phenomenal season. I think he's right around 2 steals and 2 blocks per game too. So just all around incredible season. Definitely my pick for MVP this year. I think I might do another episode. Maybe next episode I'll break down season awards and actually talk about that more. For now, I won't get too much into it. Yeah, he's definitely an MVP candidate and definitely a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate. But yeah, just that Buck system that they've created is just built around the drive and kick of Giannis. He can basically drive it and put it down on basically any defense in the league, and if you don't try to send multiple guys at him to stop that, he'll just dunk it over basically anyone's head. There's very few defenders in the league that will have very much success in stopping that in a one-on-one scenario. People might point to people like Al Horford, do a little bit of damage. Obviously Kawhi, Joel Embiid to an extent, but Embiid definitely not quick enough to stay in front of him just all the way up from the 3-point line. Yeah, so their whole system is built around the driving kick, Giannis driving in, and if you send a guy to help in that scenario, he just kicks out and finds one of the many reliable, efficient 3-point shooters that they have on this Bucks squad. That's basically been their philosophy the last few years, is just collecting catch and shoot 3-point pieces to put around Giannis, and I'd say it's definitely worked really well as far as the regular season goes. Defensively, though, they're the way they guard pick and roll using Brook Lopez is another thing. They really stick to it, and that's something you'll find a lot with Coach Bud, is he really sticks to his game plan, doesn't change it too much. He just kind of has this is what we do, and this is what we do every time. We're going to beat teams doing this more often than we will lose, doing this. And so that's why they kind of follow that strategy in a playoff setting. I don't know how well that will work. Last season, it proved to fail against the Raptors, going up against another fantastic coach in Nick Nurse, who devised a defensive scheme of kind of forming a wall against Giannis. Obviously, putting Kawhi on him was the difference maker in that series, but kind of making it so you're not committing 2 guys on him to stop to leave a 3-point shooter open, but you're also not just letting him take one guy off the dribble to drive to the rim. That was a really impressive game plan adjustment by Nick Nurse that he made last season. I guess we'll see how it works out this season with Coach Bud. On the defensive end, though, they usually put Brook Lopez, in that drop coverage on the pick and roll, protecting the rim. That's the one thing that they always seem to do, and it works out pretty well, just because if Brook Lopez was doing anything else on the pick and roll, like, trying to play up, trying to stop a shooter, or, switching, or anything like that, he would be in trouble. Brook Lopez is not that type of a defender. But that's why Brook Lopez has had the magnificent defensive season that he has had, is because he's staying home and doing the thing that he's good at. Obviously, pretty good thing to do when you're a coach is have your players do the things that they're good at. So this whole season, Bucks have destroyed teams in the full court. Regular season games are won in the full court, and postseason games are won in the half court. The pace of the whole game slows down come playoff time. High leverage possessions are even more high leverage than they were in the regular season. Defense is, at another level. Usually to win close playoff games, you're going to need a ISO scorer, somebody that can have the ball at the end of a shot clock or at the end of a quarter, at the end of a game, and go and get you points, go and get you a basket. That's kind of what Kawhi was on that Raptors team last year. They had all those guys that were good defensive pieces. They had their skills that they brought to the team. They're all good spot-up shooters. They're all shot makers, but none of them are really shot creators other than Kawhi. Kawhi's the shot creator on the team. And so much of what makes Giannis useful is kind of done in the full court. Half court, he's still an animal, but from what we've seen last season and even a little bit the season before, when playoff games slow down and it's time for them to have a last-second shot or a big shot where they need a bucket now, and it's a slowed down half court set, Giannis is really their only shot creator that they can turn to. And Giannis is not a traditional shot creator, in any sense of the word. He's definitely, he has the move that he goes to, which is he'll drive past you, Euro step through the lane to dunk it, and that works more often than not, but it's just obviously a much harder thing to pull off in a intense half-court set at the end of a game, and that we've seen that hasn't really come to pan out for him at the end of games, previous postseasons. That'll be interesting to see. I think that's the number one argument against the Bucks making it out of the East. But I think they've really earned the position of saying that they should be the favorite, and I think that is fair. That is the case that Milwaukee should be looked at as the favorite to make it out of the East. So the Clippers are the second seed in the West. They haven't been the second seed most of the season, I believe. At least not that I remember. Pretty sure the Nuggets have been second seed for almost the whole season up until, the last month or so. Last month or so of the season, I should say. That was happening. The Clippers, this whole season, they've played most of their games without one of either Paul George or Kawhi. Most of the games without Paul George. Kawhi is also load managed a fair amount, obviously. So a lot of their games was not with their full squad, but they do have a very awesome supporting cast around those two guys. The centerpieces of that team, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, are two of the most representative players of the era we're in right now, which is 3-and-D, two-way wings. I think are really what is ruling the league right now, and will, going into this decade is kind of like the main prototype star that you want to get, or at least prototype valuable rotation player that you want to get. Kind of like how centers have been that thing for so long. Centers have always been the ones to go first overall when you see like a generational type talent at the center position. That's what you want to get. It's what people used to think every team needs. But I think, in this decade, I think that it really will shift into the perspective of two-way wings. If you can get a two-way wing with tremendous upside, I think that's probably, in a vacuum, the best pick you can make in upcoming drafts. Obviously, both Kawhi and Paul George are really good shot creators. Both of them are guys that can play ISO, going to give you buckets at the end of a playoff game. Both of those guys can fill that role, which is much more than can be said with the Bucks. In the last 5 possessions of a game, in intense, slow half-court sets, I just think the Clippers are the team you're going to want to have over the Bucks. It's just they have the pieces to have spot-up shooters late in games. They want to run with a lineup of Kawhi and PG out there with JaMychal Green down there at center. But yeah, you're definitely going to want to have a shot maker, preferably. Maybe that's Marcus Morris sliding in there at 5. Maybe you can get away with him guarding Brook Lopez on the other end. I think the smartest thing Bud can do in that matchup, though, if you're putting Marcus Morris on Brook Lopez, is have Lopez post up. Which I don't know if we've really even ever seen Lopez post up in a Bucks jersey. Brook Lopez came into the league as a premier post scorer. That was his thing. He has a back to the basket game. He's one of the only guys left in the league that has like an actual back to the basket game. And that's what he was good at. He was a 20-point per game scorer with the Nets. What he's really turned into with the Bucks, though, is spot up, floor stretching, big, just shoots threes, league average level, which is what they need at the center position, and then plays good defense in the restricted area. That's really been his role on this team, and he's done it fantastically. But when the Clippers on the offensive end want to bring in a squad that are all spot-up shooters around the duo of Kawhi and Paul George, then they'll bring in somebody like Marcus Morris at 5. Defensively, the only way Bud can really take advantage of that is putting Brook Lopez down in the post, having him actually post up. And it'd be interesting to see if they do go with a lineup like that, if that actually happens, because that wouldn't be a bad plan, in those half-court sets, to just give it to Brook Lopez and have him post up Marcus Morris. I think that's a pretty good game plan versus what they would have going for them, which is having Giannis try to drive on Kawhi. If they do go with the lineup out there of Kawhi and Paul George, which they're a really good tandem together, Kawhi and Paul George, because they can play on ball or off ball on offense well. So you can have one of them isolated. This guy's gonna try to score this possession, and the other one can stretch the floor super well. They both can catch and shoot. Paul George probably a little bit better than Kawhi is at just spot up 3-point shooting. Either guy you want to give it to in isolation, which I'm guessing is probably going to be Kawhi. Kawhi's a little bit better at that. I shouldn't say a little bit. Kawhi might be the best player in the league at the little mid-range post-up, turnaround jumper game, like old Jordan. Like 96, the last three-peat Jordan, 96 through 98 Jordan. That's really the type of scorer Kawhi has turned into. And so I think that would be your best bet in the end of a playoff game, having Kawhi run a set like that with Marcus Morris in the far side corner, maybe Patrick Beverley or Lou Williams, somebody like that at the top of the arc. Paul George somewhere out there stretching the floor outside the line. And then maybe somebody like Landry Shamet. They just, they're a very versatile team. Can switch in a lot of different lineups, but I'm guessing they're probably going to be closing games with Beverly and Lou Williams out there at the 2 guard spots, and then have Paul George at the 3, Kawhi at 4, and have JaMychal Green or Marcus Morris or Montrezl Harrell, and at the 5. Personally, I think kind of trying to build that roster or that team that they had in Toronto last year, where they had Ibaka or Gasol at the 5, who are both floor stretch. They're capable of stretching the floor. Harrell having out there at the end of games. I think on the offensive end, at the end of the games, all he really can provide is maybe if they want to run the Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell pick and roll, which is pretty deadly. It's a very good pick and roll tandem, one of the best in the league. But and if that's working all game long or something on them, and they want to continue using that at the end of the games, I'm sure that's probably a pretty good option too. But I don't see that as necessarily the thing that they're going to go to. I think that they're probably going to be doing, ISO with Kawhi. Oh yeah, and also I forgot about Reggie Jackson. So Reggie Jackson is another guard that they could have out there. He probably won't be playing crunch time, I'm guessing, unless he's just on fire that game or something, which, we know Reggie Jackson can do something like that. Just explode off for 20 points in a playoff game. It's definitely within the realm of possibility. But on the defensive end, obviously they have a lot of ways to hurt you, especially with Harrell in there. He can guard 3 through 5 really pretty easily. Good paint presence, good rebounder, good rim protector for his size. Obviously he's an undersized center. 5 years ago he'd be playing power forward for sure, but modern game he's definitely playing center. Zubats, I guess I don't know too much about Zubats on the defensive end. I don't think he's anything too special. But obviously you got Kawhi and Paul George, who are 2 of the best 5 perimeter. I think that's safe to say, best 5 perimeter defenders in the league. I think most people would say Kawhi is the best perimeter defender in the league. Paul George definitely falls in the top 5 somewhere. I think for sure. I think that's something that's kind of unarguable to say. Both obviously tremendous two-way talents. And then Patrick Beverley. Patrick Beverley is viewed as a lockdown defender, and I think certainly he can do that on certain possessions. Some people have different opinions on really what he is on the defensive end, or at least I think everybody agrees that he's a good defender. But I think the media sometimes tries to make him out to be like one of the best defenders in the league, or some superstar defensive player, which I just don't know if that's really what he is. He obviously is like a dog on the defensive end, and he's working really hard. He's a pest. I just don't know. It seems like he gets kind of caught or blown by on a lot of possessions that I watch, at least, even though he's like looking locked in and he's swarming and looking really active and bug-eyed and just being crazy pest on that end of the floor, which is something that he's definitely really recognizable for, really famous for, just making players angry like that. I think it is effective to an extent, but I just don't know how we can compare him to some other backcourt defenders. So, if we have a finals matchup of Clippers versus Bucks, unless we see Coach Bud able to throw some changes in there and really do something special, I'd still probably take Clippers. I think Clippers in a series against the Bucks, I think they would match up wise and everything. Now on to the Lakers. Lakers have obviously had a really successful season. Best record in the Western Conference, second best record in the league. Not really too far behind the Bucks. Obviously, the loss of Avery Bradley is going to hurt them quite a bit here in the bubble. Not having him around, he's definitely, he plays a important role on that Lakers team and what he can do for you on the defensive end, guarding the point guard on the opposite team. He's a good piece to have out there on the offense and defensive end, just with what his play style is. I hear a lot of people say, like, losing Avery Bradley's not a big deal. You can fill up his minutes with some other guards out there that, they're pretty good too on the team. But I think just the type of player Avery Bradley is, not necessarily that he's like so much better than these other guys, but what he brings to a lineup on the Lakers roster is he's just a better fit. He is the guy that you can rely on guarding the opposite team's point guard in a playoff series. Like, J.R. Smith is not going to be doing that great of a job guarding Damian Lillard or somebody like that in the playoff series. That's something that Avery Bradley can actually hold his own in. Avery Bradley is a good spot-up three-point shooter, which is another thing that this league is really built around nowadays, is spot-up three-point shooting, where the main game plan action that you have going, like, which is either, usually like a drive and kick or a high screen pick and roll, or, any kind of pick and roll is used quite a lot. You want to place spot-up shooters around that to stretch the floor, to give that action room to operate, and operate successfully against the normal amount of defenders that you would have on it. And if it's working well enough, teams are going to want to game plan against it and start bringing a little bit more attention from those other defenders on the floor to that action. And as soon as you do that, since they have those spot-up three-point shooters out there surrounding that action, they can kick it out to them and punish the defense for collapsing. And so that's really, in a sense, what floor spacing means, if anybody was wondering. I know some of my friends listening to my podcast don't know a lot about the NBA, but essentially that is what floor spacing is. You got shooters out there that the defense is going to need to respect and can't sag off of, and with them, holding tight out there to a shooter who's way out behind the three-point line, there's a lot more room to operate in the paint and in the center of the floor. Dwight Howard has had a really good comeback sort of season. A lot of people might just look at his stats and be like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, because his stats has fallen off since last season, but he's played a specified role on this team. He's not the inside scorer or somebody that's going to be playing 30 minutes a game getting rebounds like he used to be on all the other teams he was on before. This season he's really been that guy you bring off the bench as a good defensive center who's going to get blocks, going to get rebounds, and start fast breaks. That's what he's going to do. He's going to get the defensive rebound, or get a block, get a defensive rebound, get a steal, something, and outlet to LeBron, to AD, to somebody to go down the floor and get points in transition. And so that's a good role that he's been playing on this team so far this season. Kyle Kuzma hasn't had the best of seasons compared to what was expected of him. I think the role he's just kind of been playing really isn't the type of player that he has been so far in his career, so that's just been a little unnatural. I think the player that they do need at his spot is a little bit more of what kind of like Danny Green has been doing for them. He's a 3-and-D type of guy. Kyle Kuzma, defense isn't his strong suit, that's for sure. He's not like the worst on that end, but he's definitely not anything special. Kyle Kuzma's 3-point shooting it comes and goes. He's a good ISO scorer. That's what he's kind of made his money on so far in his career on the bad Lakers teams that he has been on. He's somebody that can do that at a high enough level to get attention as being hey, that guy's pretty good. He's got some potential. There's not a lot of teams that need a guy so much to do that. And when they do, a lot of times that's a good piece to bring off the bench. And I just don't know if the Lakers are really going to start bringing Kyle Kuzma off the bench just because, he's famous. He's kind of a big name, kind of looked at as kind of a fringe star type of player at the beginning of this season. I think, that status has kind of fallen a bit with the season that he has had. But if Kyle Kuzma can develop into more of a spot-up 3-point shooter, somebody who can catch and shoot and just space the floor in that way and can, catch defenses off guard by cutting to the rim, setting good screens, stuff like that. That's really what's going to make him have a long career in this league and be a valuable rotation piece. And also just putting forth a little bit more effort and awareness on the defensive end would be very valuable to him. And so, he's a young guy, so it'll be fascinating to see how he fares this season, this postseason. Obviously, the additions of Dion Waiters and J.R. Smith are going to be something that a lot of fans are looking forward to seeing in the playoffs this season with the Lakers. Both of them, heat check, scoring guard type players that come off the bench. Well, they haven't come off the bench their whole career, but this postseason, that's really what you're looking at. I think they'll both be probably coming off the bench. It's weird to see J.R. Smith is number 21 on this Lakers team, and Dion Waiters is number 18, jersey numbers. It'll be weird to see them in Lakers jerseys with those numbers. It's very funny. They're, J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters are both very memeable players. This team's just kind of full of those memeable type of guys. They got J.R. Smith, they got Dion, they got Rajon Rondo, they got JaVale McGee, Markieff Morris, Dwight Howard, Jared Dudley, Alex Caruso. Wow, the biggest one. I was forgetting about him. KCP, in a way, he kind of gets he gets memed on a bit. Very memeable squad, but, good NBA players. It'll be interesting to see what JR and Dion can do for you. It's kind of funny to me that they signed both of them because they kind of just do the same thing as each other for the most part. They're not going to bring too much different skills to the table. Wow, did J.R. Smith really sign for that much? On ESPN, on the roster, it says his salary is $15.7 million, and they just picked him up? Is that for real? I don't know if I believe that. I'm going to need to check that later. It's $15.7 million for J.R. Smith right now. He wasn't even on a roster this entire season until just now when they lost Avery Bradley going into the bubble and they thought they needed to sign somebody else. That is weird. It says Dion's only making $375,000. So maybe they have those backwards. But still, that seems really low for either of them. One of those is way too high. One of those is way too low. I don't know. But I mean, if they're just signing JR to go into the bubble, $375K is that's actually a lot. So I don't know. But it says that by Dion's name. But I don't know. Also, shout out Dion Waiters, Syracuse. If you listened to my last podcast, you found out that I'm a Syracuse fan. So shout out to him. Those other guys that they can throw in there in replacement of Avery Bradley to guard the other team's point guard. Really got Alex Caruso, which I know some people might laugh at that, but honestly, he's actually a pretty pretty good option for that. He's a good defensive player. He has good awareness. He really fits well alongside LeBron. So honestly, he might be the choice going forward to be the starting point guard with Rondo out. I think even if they do bring Rondo back, I think honestly that might be a hot take or an unpopular opinion, but I think Caruso might want to start over. You might want to start him over Rajon Rondo, even with Rondo healthy. I feel like that probably won't happen though, just because of Rondo's status. This season, he really hasn't been the Rondo of old, the Rondo that we've seen in the past. I think advanced metrics say that he's like one of the bottom 4 point guards on defense in the league, which Rondo's strong suit has always been the defensive end. So that'll be interesting to see. Maybe playoff Rondo will show up and be a completely different animal, but we'll see. But yeah, Alex Caruso, not a bad pick there at starting point guard for the Lakers going into the bubble. KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's also a guy that you can obviously not point guard, but he could play. I mean, on the defensive end, he could play point guard. I mean, offensively, you don't really need a point guard. You just need somebody to bring the ball up the floor, which LeBron can do. I think in playoff series though, they'd prefer to have somebody out there most of the game that's going to be taking the ball up the court that isn't LeBron, but just for a lot of the possessions. But they can do either one, just to conserve LeBron's energy a little bit more. But KCP is definitely capable of just bringing the ball up the floor and making a pass to get into some kind of offensive scheme to get an offense moving. But on the defensive end, yeah, KCP, not a bad pick. He can guard guards and smaller wings. Quinn Cook, I don't know if he's going to be seeing much playing time this postseason. He really hasn't seen much playing time this entire season. With Rondo and Avery Bradley out, Quinn Cook might be someone that they turn to a little bit. Obviously not on the defensive end. That's just not really his role. But he's a little bit of a heat-checky point guard that they throw out there. So they do have a lot of those guys coming off the bench, though. They obviously have J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters, Quinn Cook, Markieff Morris. Cal Kuzma will probably be starting. But all those guys are a little bit of, heat-checky, scoring-type players. JaVale McGee has had a good season as a rim protector, rim roller. That's really been his whole thing this season, defensive rebounder. He's definitely playing, his role well. And at the beginning of the season, they were saying they were signing Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee so they'd have people to play the 5 spot to have AD play 4. Just because that's what AD prefers. AD likes playing 4, which I can understand. And Rob Pelinka gave the reason of saying, like, they actually do want AD to play 4 because they don't want him being worn down all season long guarding 5s and having to be met at the rim or meeting people at the rim all the time, stuff like that. Which I thought was interesting. I never really thought about before, conserving him for the future. But maybe Rob Pelinka, that's just something he came up with to give as a reason, when the real reason is, Anthony Davis just doesn't want to play 5. So, yeah, I guess I don't know about that. But definitely in the playoffs, I think their crunch time lineups are going to call for bringing AD in at 5. That's just the way that they're going to be winning these games, I think. Obviously, McGee and Howard will get their minutes in there, and there'll be time soaked up with AD at the 4. But I think in crunch time, the best option will probably be going with AD at 5, and I think that's what they'll do. And having LeBron in at 4, or maybe Markieff Morris in at 4, LeBron at 3, something like that, or even Kuzma. I think they'll probably close games with LeBron with either Kuzma or Morris out there as the other forward, or maybe even Danny Green playing 3, and then we'll have like Caruso and KCP. Or Caruso and J.R. Smith if he's really on that game, or Dion Waiters, or They also have a lot of different lineups they can go with, kind of like the Clippers. But the difference between them and the Clippers is a lot of these lineups with the Lakers, the guys you're putting out there in crunch time, are like, that doesn't seem right. Like they should have something else, right? Not saying these guys are bad players or anything, but crunch time in a playoff game on a contending team, they're not quite as deep. They have a good number of players around the same level, but that level isn't as high as those pieces that they have around Kawhi and Paul George over across the hall and with the Clippers. But Danny Green has had a really good season with them, good 3-and-D guy. Obviously, LeBron, I should start talking about LeBron and Anthony Davis. I think this season has shown, I think this is the best season of any, even though, this has been a really short year, but the best pick-and-roll duo in a single season ever, I think. I'll be curious to actually look up some advanced stats and stuff about that. But man, I've caught quite a few Lakers games this season, and man, that's just such a reliable game plan to go with. Is LeBron AD pick and roll, which that's the first thing I thought of when that AD trade did go down back in summer of last year. Was that having LeBron. Oh man, having a pick and roll duo of LeBron and AD is got to be like the scariest thing in the league. I think it's definitely on par with, Giannis Euro stepping through the lane, dunking. I think it might be even scarier game plan than that. Just having something like that you can surround with shooters, and then also on top of that, both of them being better shot creators in general than Giannis. Both guys that can put their back to the basket in the mid-range and get you a reliable shot at the end of games. Both of them are transcendent superstars. Two of the best 5 players in the league, AD and LeBron. So I think both of those guys in a half-court set at the end of games are better options than Giannis in the playoffs. That might be a hot take. People might not like that. I might get hate from any random Bucks fan that listens to this, but I think Giannis is obviously on that list too. Top 5 best players in the NBA. I think he's the MVP this season. I think LeBron is not the MVP this season. I think that shouldn't really even be an argument, and I'll probably talk about that another time. But yeah, in a playoff series, at the end of a game in a half-court set, LeBron is a better choice than Giannis. Anthony Davis is a better choice than Giannis. And I think Anthony Davis might be the guy that they start going to more often than not with at the end of the games. But, playoff LeBron is a different animal too, though. But people forget the little bit of playoff Anthony Davis that we have seen. He's been kind of a monster. I remember that just I think it was 2 years ago, that Portland and New Orleans playoff series in the first round, where Portland was the 3 seed, New Orleans was 6, and New Orleans swept the Blazers. It was an upset and a sweep. I don't even think the Blazers were missing anybody. Like, that's just how it was. I remember it was like Anthony Davis and Nikola Mirotic and Drew Holiday, those guys out there. I kind of want to look at Anthony Davis' stats from that playoff run, which really wasn't even a run. They won that playoff series that they weren't supposed to win by a lot, and they won it by a lot. Yeah, so AD has been in the playoffs twice, and both times he was an animal. 2014-15, they lost in the first round. It was actually a sweep. I don't know who they were playing in 2015, but some good Western Conference team. They might have been the 8th seed. They could have been playing the Warriors that season, who were the first seed in the West, I believe. They won the title that year. So AD's stats from 14-15 in the playoffs, he was averaging 32 points per game, 3 blocks, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.3 steals, 89% from the line, 54% from the field. He was kind of an animal. And then the 2017-18 playoff run, which was that series against the Blazers, and they lost in the second round, I believe, to like the Rockets or Warriors or somebody. But he averaged 30 points per game, 2.3 blocks, 13.4 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 2 steals, 83% from the line, 52% from the field. Yeah, both of and that was in 9 games. So they swept the first round and they lost the second round in 5. So AD, obviously not a big sample size for what we've seen in the playoffs from him so far, but what we have seen has been next level. Very good playoff performances. I think that he'll be an interesting thing to watch this season in the playoffs. Yeah, obviously what people want to hear now is my prediction of who would win against, Lakers, Clippers. I think so far, like I said, I think Clippers would beat Bucks in the final series. And I think if the Lakers met the Bucks in the finals, I think I would also take Lakers, but less so. I think that matchup-wise, Clippers have a better chance. I have a better margin of victory against the Bucks in my book than Lakers would. But I think I would still probably give the edge to the Lakers just in a playoff series. Those guys just some scary guys to go against in a finals series. Obviously, Danny Green, one of the best 3-point shooters in finals history. He's been there 3 times, I think. Yeah, and he's shooting like 50% from 3 in the 3 final series he's been in. So if that keeps up, that's going to be scary to stop. And then obviously that stretching the floor around a LeBron and AD pick and roll. That's really all I have to say. But Lakers versus Clippers, it really depends to me on how much LeBron and AD show up, especially LeBron, how much he's going to show up this year at the age of 35 in a playoff run. It'll be interesting to see. But I think I might pick... This is a really close one. I think it'd go either way really easily. But I think if LeBron is 2018 LeBron in the playoffs, and AD keeps up, at least somewhat of what we've seen from him in the playoffs so far, and Danny Green is continues to be a reliable 3-point shooter stretching the floor, it's going to be so hard to beat. Obviously, both teams are going to be so hard to beat, but I think I might give the slight edge to the Lakers. The Clippers game plan though would also. That's going to be a tough one, but I think I'm going to give the slight edge to the Lakers. Hello, and thank you for listening to the second episode of the LoJoWo podcast. I didn't get to everything today that I said I was going to at the beginning of the podcast. I did break down, the three main contenders. I think I'm going to save the dark horse contenders, first round matchups, and Western Conference playoff race for next episode. I'm going to save all of those conversations for next episode. I'll be recording and editing a good amount this week, just because I actually rolled my ankle pretty bad last night playing basketball with some friends. I recorded this podcast yesterday, and then later that night I went and played basketball with some friends. Rolled my ankle pretty bad. It's a Monday. Yesterday was Monday, so today's Tuesday. Not going to really be too active this week, so that gives me actually a lot of time to work on the podcast and stuff, which will be good because I think it's a really nice time to get in a lot of episodes right before the season restarts to kind of get through a lot of the things that I want to talk about before games start up again. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise. I decided to cut this one short and save those other topics for later, just because I'm wanting to keep these episodes a little bit shorter. Preferably like somewhere between 30 to 60 minutes. I believe the first episode was about 50 minutes, so this one was getting a little bit long at the end of talking about the Lakers, and I still had an outro to record, so I thought that it was probably best to wrap up. I'm actually on Spotify now. I have this podcast feed up on Spotify. I got the first episode up on there last night, so if you're listening on Spotify, that part in the intro where I'm talking about the graphic on the screen probably didn't make much sense to you, because I actually made a new graphic for the Spotify feed that's completely different than the one that's shown on the YouTube video. It was really surreal seeing my podcast on Spotify for the first time. It went up really fast after I got it verified through Spotify and everything. But it was really surreal to me. I literally just, as soon as I saw it on there, I literally just had to listen to it right then. Like, I listened through the whole podcast again just on Spotify, just because I was like, wow. It's on, like, and the reason why it was so surreal to me is because Spotify is where I listen to all my podcasts, all the ones that I, kind of admire so much. So it was really weird to see mine up there with something that I created. So that was a really good feeling. But, yeah, so hopefully this kind of goes at least someplace. Like, even if it doesn't, I'm happy to just keep doing this because it's to just talk to myself and even if nobody listens to it, I think I'm just proud of, the thing that I made. So, and I think I'll just continue to get better at it. It seems really rewarding, at least so far. I wanted to touch on a little bit of stuff that I kind of forgot to talk about in the main podcast that I recorded yesterday. When I went back through and listened through what I had recorded while I was kind of editing it, I thought of more things I should mention, or maybe to clarify on some things. So I'm just gonna do that really quick, if that's okay. I noticed that when I was listening to the Bucks part, it was a lot shorter than I spent talking about the Lakers or the Clippers. So I think I'm just gonna go through, because when I was talking about the Lakers and the Clippers, I actually on my computer looked up their rosters just to think about lineups, and I didn't do that with the Bucks. I just was kind of talking off the top of my head. I didn't really mention very many players. So I think I'm just going to kind of go through and actually touch on a few of the players that I think are important to that team, and really just touch on players that I think you might see in this NBA restart in the postseason. People, just guys that you might see out there a little bit, maybe guys that you probably won't but might have the chance to or something. I'm just going to kind of touch on them a little bit. So first off, Chris Middleton. I'm actually kind of surprised I didn't talk about him at all in the podcast I recorded yesterday, which seems kind of dumb in retrospect, because obviously he's the second best player on that Bucks team, like by a mile, I think. Unarguably, he's the second best player on the team. He had an incredible season this year, definitely the best season of his career. He was an All-Star last season, which I thought was kind of a stretch for him to be an All-Star last season, but All-Star voters, they really favored the teams with the best records. This season, he was definitely deserving of that All-Star spot that he got. This year, kind of an historic season, really. 21 points per game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. He's so close to joining the 50-40-90 club this season. 49.99% from the field, which typically when you're talking about field goal percentage, you just round it to the nearest whole percentage, whole digit, which this is out to 2 decimal places, 99. So I feel like it should count, but I know that the official 50-40-90 club does carry out to 2 decimal places. And so whatever it is after that second decimal place, that's what it is. If it doesn't round up to 50.00, then you're not in the 50-40-90 club. So that's why, there's only 8 players to ever be in the 50-40-90 club. Chris Middleton was so close to making it this season. But yeah, so he shot 49.99 from the field, 42% from 3, and 91% from the line. Just a phenomenal season from Chris Middleton. He's really kind of the perfect third best player you'd want on a dynasty championship team in this modern era. Just think about in LA, if LeBron and AD, if you added Chris Middleton to that Lakers team, maybe you swap out Danny Green with Chris Middleton. like it's over. That's it. Like that's a wrap. You might as well not even play the season. That would be the most deadly trio, I think, just in terms of fit with each other. Chris Middleton is the second best player on this Bucks team, which in terms of second best players in the league, he's not a bad one. Like he's a good player. He's a really good player. But I think that he would be best utilized on, in the most ideal situation as your third guy who's, really doesn't need the ball much, but get his points, really contribute and impact the game anyways. That's just kind of the player he is. He does have a little bit of an ISO scoring game. He's a shot creator in a sense, but he's not a shot creator to the level that even Giannis is. I think Giannis is definitely probably the better option closing a game. And even though, we were talking about earlier, as far as superstars go, Giannis is not too great of a closer late in games from what we've seen so far. I think that Chris Middleton is like a fringe star level ISO scorer, like closer level player, and that's not what you're going to want in a final series or Eastern Conference final series, closing your games, unless he's really hot that game or something, but it's just not as reliable as you would want it to be. You need a superstar ISO scorer, that kind of a situation. Him closing a game against, like, say, the Clippers in the finals would not really be much of an option, I would say, because he's probably going to be covered by Paul George, and that is just not sound like a good idea to have a Chris Middleton who, he's a good ISO scorer, but he's not a great ISO scorer, and he's going up against a great one-on-one defender in Paul George. That doesn't seem like, a recipe for success necessarily. So that's why I didn't really mention him at all for closing a game against the Clippers. But yeah, Chris Middleton overall had a really good season. Eric Bledsoe, starting point guard for the Milwaukee Bucks. He had an alright season. He's definitely had better. I think the role that he kind of plays on this team, it would be better utilized if they had a different point guard in his spot. And that's not bad on Eric Bledsoe at all. It's just the type of player that he has been his whole career is not the type of player that they have on this team. I think like a Marcus Smart or a Patrick Beverley would be a much better type of player to fit into Eric Bledsoe's role. Eric Bledsoe is a great defender like those guys. Obviously probably not the same level as Marcus Smart is, but he is a good perimeter point guard defender. But where he doesn't really match up is his three-point percentage or three-point shooting. I guess they do kind of have around the same percentage, but the difference is Marcus Smart is much more of a catch-and-shoot three-point threat. Eric Bledsoe has shown to be not that deadly of a catch-and-shoot three-point player. Really where he's kind of made his bread and butter has been off the driving against closeouts. But yeah, overall, he had an alright season, 15-5-5, 35% from three, which is, league average, but catch and shoot splits really aren't what you want just as a starting point guard on this team. Also, he's shrank a lot in the playoffs in the past. He really hasn't ever been there in the playoffs in a good way, so that's something that will be interesting to see going forward if Eric Bledsoe can contribute in a playoff setting this season. On to the next guy. I think this is the guy that they might actually close some games this postseason over Bledsoe, and they'll start George Hill at point guard. Not start, but, close games with him at point guard. I think that might happen a little bit, and I think that it might be smart to do that, depending on the matchup and depending on how each of them are playing. George Hill has had a really good season this year. He's savvy veteran backup point guard. He's had a lot of experience in this league. He was the best three-point shooter this entire season. He had the best percentage in the league, which I think was kind of fluky. Don't get me wrong, I think that he is a solid three-point shooter, good catch-and-shoot threat, but he shot 48% from three and led the league by, I think, 3% ahead of the guy in second, who was, I think, Steph Curry. I think that is going to fall off a little bit. Also, the season before this, he only shot 31%, which is low for him, but still, he went from 31% in one season to 48% the next, which is just, that's kind of a big jump. But so it'll be interesting to see if that carries over, especially after this really long break. If he's still hot from downtown, that's definitely going to be a factor moving forward. In the next episodes, I think I'm going to end up talking about all four of the top four three-point shooters this season as far as percentage goes. George Hill's the only one of them, one of the four that's on one of these contending teams, but I'm going to be talking about, dark horse contenders and other playoff teams and the playoff race in the Western Conference. So I'll end up talking about Steph Curry and JJ Redick and Duncan Robinson. All three of those guys have had really good seasons from beyond the line, so I'll end up talking about them too. But then we have Wesley Matthews on this Bucks squad. He has been a 3-and-D wing his whole career, really kind of like one of the main guys you used to think of like 5 to 10 years ago when you talk about 3-and-D wings. So he's definitely built for what the league has turned into, but the only problem is he's a little bit on the old side now. He's kind of aging out of his career, out of his effectiveness as a rotation player. He's had a meh season as a starting wing on this Bucks squad this season, but he's also a savvy veteran, so I think that he might prove useful in a playoff series. So you'll definitely see him out there during the restart. Pat Connaughton, I think he's a good 3-and-D project. I think that's the reason they have him on the squad, is his 3-and-D potential, but he has really, his career so far, really punished teams by just punishing the closeouts, by slashing to the rim when they close out on him. So he's really not doing as much damage as you would like from catch and shoot, but he is still he is still punishing the defense when they overcommit to the action inside, when they kick it out to him and they close out on him. He's a very athletic, bouncy guard wing player. So he was in the dunk contest, if you remember that, this season, and he was phenomenal in that. He obviously has one of the highest verticals in the NBA. I think it's like a 44-inch vertical. He used to be a MLB player, I think. He's a good player. And you'll definitely see him out there during the postseason. Dante DiVincenzo, he's a nice young 3-and-D guard. Some of you might remember him from, the Villanova championship team a few years ago, where I think he had like 37 points in the finals, or in that national championship game, which is, I think he broke the record for most by a player in the national championship game, and I think his career high before that was like 20 points in a game. But yeah, he's definitely had a really good sophomore season this year in the NBA. He's a nice young 3-and-D guard. He can play make a little bit. He's just played a pretty valuable role off the bench this season, and I think that's where you'll see him in the postseason as well, in that second unit. Then you got Robin Lopez. Basically, for those of you that don't know, Robin Lopez is Brooke Lopez's twin brother, who Brooke Lopez is the starting center on this Bucks team, and Robin Lopez is the backup, and they're twins. He's basically the same as Brooke, like play style wise too. He will probably only get on the floor this postseason just with backup center minutes while they're sitting and resting Brooke Lopez. I've heard a lot of people talk about the potential of them having a Lopez lineup, where at some point in the game they'll have both of them out there on the floor at the same time, which I don't really foresee happening. It might happen, but I don't really see the usefulness in that in most of the series that they're going to be having. Probably the only time I think it could happen is maybe against the Sixers, possibly if they have Horford and Embiid out there at the same time. They might get away with doing something like that for a little bit, but I don't really see why you would really want to. The other series they might try to do it in if they meet the Raptors in the Eastern Conference, they would probably if Ibaka and Gasol are both out there at the same time on the floor, yeah, you could probably throw both Lopez brothers out there and you'd get away with it, but I don't really see the point in that. He probably will just be playing, backup center minutes a little bit. DJ Wilson, he's a really nice, young, bouncy rim runner. I really like him as a young prospect. He has a lot of 3-and-D potential as well. I think that he's going to make a good living in this league. I think he's only like 21, but I think he's going to stick around in the league for a while, just with the way the league's going. I think he's going to be a nice a nice piece moving forward, playing the 4 or 5 spot in the future for a team. You probably won't see him out there in this postseason. You might a little bit, but that'll probably just be in garbage time, or if somebody's in foul trouble, or you got injuries or something. Just thought I mentioned him. Kyle Korver, obviously one of the best 3-point specialists in NBA history. He is, I believe, 38 this season, though, and he hasn't played a lot of minutes this season. I think the only floor time he will get is, obviously not in crunch time or starting in the game. It'll probably just be, some second, third quarter minutes where, they just throw him in there to run around some screens and drop some plays for him to get some open 3-point shots, and then take him back out. I think that's basically the role that he's going to serve on this team, which can be actually big and swing a little bit of a playoff game, I think, could happen. Sterling Brown, 3-and-D wing. You probably won't see him out there this season, or this postseason, unless, there's foul trouble or injuries, but he is another 3-and-D wing piece that they do have on this team, which they love those guys, so those type of guys. Ersan Ilyasova, I think I actually talked about him in the first episode a little bit with the Serge Ibaka trade with the Thunder and Magic. I've actually kind of always liked him a little bit, and he used to be a bit of a rotation player earlier in his career, but he's a little bit on the old side now. He's obviously he's a stretch 4. That's really what his role has been his entire career, and that's really why he keeps getting signed late in his career. You might see him out there a tiny bit, again, maybe just in there to stretch the floor a little bit at some points during the game if somebody's in foul trouble or something like that, but probably won't be out there too much. One thing I also want to touch on with when I was talking about the Lakers, and I was talking about Kyle Kuzma, I actually, just listening back to it, it sounded like I came across like I was coming way harder down on Kuzma than I was meaning to. I'm actually, I consider myself a Kuzma believer. I believe in a future for Kuzma in this league, not just in the way that I was describing him to be helpful to this Lakers team, but the type of player he is an ISO rhythm scorer. And I also noticed something that seemed kind of hypocritical in what I said when I mentioned him was, I just got done talking about the Bucks and about how they need a ISO scorer to close games in the playoffs, and then I went on and mentioned Kuzma and about how his main skill is he's an ISO scorer and that teams don't really need that. I said that, and that if they would need that, they would bring it off the bench. Which, just to clarify, when I say that teams don't need that, I mean teams don't need a Kuzma level ISO scorer. Kuzma is a good ISO scorer, but he's still a role player. He's not a star. He's a role player ISO scorer. That is his skill. But he's not like the level of a ISO scorer that you'd rely on to end games, to close out games for you. That's not the type of ISO rhythm scorer that he is. And so that's why he's a type of ISO scorer that you'd want to bring in a second unit that can get buckets. You can draw up some plays for going up against another team's second unit, another team's backup players, and, get some points that way in the middle of a game. And, those are useful players. Will Barton is that type of player that is on the Nuggets, and I think that is where he's kind of best utilized. He's a heat check player. He can go off against starting lineups too, but Kyle Kuzma, at least at this point in his career, I think that would probably be where he's best utilized, just right now, where his skills have developed so far. Another thing I want to touch on was with the Clippers. When I was talking about the Clippers, and I mentioned what center they were going to go with to close games against the Bucks in a final series, it kind of seemed like I was really skimming over Harrell and Zubac. I wasn't really meaning to do that. I was just kind of trying to talk about floor stretchers that you can put in there at the center position, which neither Harrell or Zubac are floor stretchers. But Harrell and Zubac, I would bet, are probably the two most likely centers that they will be closing games with in the postseason, just because they have been all season. Those have been their two main guys that they put in there at center. Zubac has been starting games at center, and Harrell has been the sixth man along with Lou Williams that they bring in off the bench, and they kind of have been closing games with Harrell in there at center usually. So those two guys you'll definitely see a lot of in the postseason, and probably closing a lot of the games. But I was just kind of trying to think of scenarios that would really hurt the Bucks and what I would try to use closing a game against the Bucks. If Budenholzer is not going to punish you on the other end of the floor by using Brook Lopez, why would you need a Zubac or a Harrell out there? Marcus Morris and JaMychal Green can do a perfect job just putting a hand up in Brook Lopez's face as he's standing behind the three-point line. If they're just keeping him out there, you don't need a Harrell or a Zubac out there. JaMychal Green and Marcus Morris can actually space the floor on the other end, and that's something that Harrell and Zubac do not do in the slightest. So that's kind of what I was talking about with that. I should also mention in there a little bit, my prediction for Lakers versus Clippers was, I don't think it was very clear, and maybe I should clarify kind of what I meant when I said that I would give the slight edge to Lakers. I just think that I think the best case scenario for the Lakers, like the ceiling of the Lakers, I think is what I would give the slight edge to over the ceiling of the Clippers. I just think that a LeBron and AD pick and roll, I just think can beat anybody with spacing. I just think if that all works well and AD and LeBron both show up and are both dominant, I think that I'd give the edge to the Lakers. But I think that the Clippers are definitely the safer pick in a Clippers versus Lakers, as well as which team I'd bet on definitely making the Western Conference Finals. I think Clippers are a better, safer pick to do that. I think Lakers are just as capable of doing it as the Clippers. I just think the Clippers are a safer bet. Like, their floor is higher than the Lakers' floor, but I think the Lakers' ceiling is just a tiny bit higher than the Clippers' ceiling. So yeah, that's basically just my breakdown of that, and I just thought I would clarify that. So moving on, some of my friends who don't really care about the NBA said my first episode was actually entertaining to them, and I don't know if that was because of more of the history stuff I talked about, or if they liked my actual breakdown of playoff matchups, where I talked about the Nuggets and the Rockets. And I'm guessing they were entertained by the history of it, but I don't know if they were also entertained by the other stuff. So, and that's definitely what this episode is more about, me just breaking down playoff matchups and teams and stuff like that. So I wonder if they'll still think this is entertaining. I'll be curious to see that. So, if you're my friend and you're listening to this, text me right now and let me know what your answer to this question is. So next episode, I'll be doing season awards. I'll do MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, Most Improved Player, Sixth Man of the Year. I'll do all those races, and I'll definitely mention every candidate I feel is deserving of a nod for just honorable mention and stuff. Even though I don't really think the MVP race is much of a race, but I'll still talk about all those guys that I think have had at least an MVP candidate level season. So I'll talk about them too. I might even get into all NBA teams next episode if I have time. That might have to be another episode though. We'll see. It seems like, all those races might take me a little bit longer to get through. So that might have to be another episode. And I feel like I could probably make a full 30-minute episode talking about all NBA teams. So that might be what happens, but we'll see. Thank you guys for listening, though. If you're watching on YouTube and you like the podcast, please leave a like and consider subscribing. If you're listening on Spotify, please consider following the feed. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next time.